Okay, well, let me start by telling you what we have available here and what it's a twofold, what we have available and what we're not as good at, because we are a public library rather than a research facility. So what we have are books on the history of Greenfield. We have the 4-volume set, The History of Greenfield, that brings I believe the last one was published in 1954. So we're really hoping that at some point someone publishes another one to bring it up to a more modern era. We have The Conservative Rebel. We have Greenfield directories that go back to the late, I believe, late 1800s, early 1900s. And those are actually, I find them fascinating because the farther back you go, the more information there is. So you'll open a directory and you'll see not only who lived in the house, but where they worked and where the address was that they worked. And you might see who their boss was and what they did. And they put an enormous amount of information in the earlier ones. The closer you get to more modern times, they become more like phone books, where they might have a street listing with the number of people in the house, but you just get their names and possibly their ages, and the address and eventually the phone number. So those are very interesting. I'm honestly not 100% sure what the purpose was, other than possibly to have a listing of everyone who lived in Greenfield. It does also, they also cover, some of them do Montague Turner's Falls as well. Some of them include South Deerfield. I'm honestly not sure, because up until the time where they had phones, maybe it was for mailing letters to people, but if you could get around town, you could just give things to people. But so I'm honestly not, but they are a very great resource and they're fascinating to read. They are done, it depends on the directory. Most of them are alphabetical. So they all have some sort of alphabetical component to them, so you can look people up like in the phone book these days, last name, first name. I believe some of the older ones also had street by street listing as well. It literally kind of depends on what year it was done and what they were doing at that time. But they are a lot of fun to read. We have old poll tax records. I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't looked at those a lot because they're a bit on the fragile side, so I try not to take them out unless someone is specifically looking for them. We have old maps. We don't keep those out because they're huge and we don't have the room for them, but they are available upon request. We have a handful of genealogies that have been gifted to the library. We have an extensive collection of German residents of the area. There was a patron that used to live here who eventually moved and I believe has unfortunately passed on, who every time he came out with a new volume, he'd send us the next binder. We have histories of Franklin County towns. So, realizing that borders shifted and different people moved to different areas, we have histories of all of the Franklin County communities. We've got the information up to 1850, the index of birth, death, marriages, that information. A lot of that is available online now and is frankly easier to read online. We do have the books for the local Franklin County, but outside of Franklin County, we can access them online. And frankly, our pièce de résistance, we have the local newspapers in all of their various incarnations on microfilm going back to, I believe it is 1754, 1740. It's very old. The first paper that I pulled out at one point had a story on, we had a bunch of school kids in one time and we pulled out one of the papers and put it on the microfilm machine. It had a story on Molly Pitcher. And a lot of the kids were like, wait a minute, we learned about that in school. That's so cool. So it was a really nice connecting point to get the kids to realize that, yes, you're learning about this in school, but this is actually a thing. This is an actual person, and there were connections to the area, and they were thrilled. It was great. The microfilm that we have, it's almost all of them. I think we're only missing a couple of reels here and there. And it is quite literally the entire run of all of the Greenfield newspapers. There are two issues with it. The first being it is not indexed. So unless you know when what you are looking for happened, you're going to be reading a lot of newspaper. There is a slight workaround for that when it works, which I'll get into in a moment. The other issue is, and we have mostly managed to deal with this issue successfully, microfilm is great, except for one thing. Because it was expensive to produce when they first started doing it, they would use the light bulbs until they burnt out. So you get some of the paper that's really bright and easy to read, and the farther through the reels you get, it gets darker and harder to read. Fortunately, we have a microfilm machine that is a wizard at adjusting light levels. So anything that we have, if the roll is on upside down and backwards, doesn't matter. You hit a button, it flips it horizontally, it flips it vertically. You can adjust the light levels. It makes it easy to read. You can print out sections of the paper. You can email it to yourself. It's a beautiful thing. Absolutely thrilled with it. And the workaround, the slight workaround that we have for the indexing issue, there's this lovely guy in New York who has done, the upstate New York, who has done this project called the Fulton History Project. I don't know how this man had this much time on his hands, but I bless him. He has made scannable PDFs of almost all of the newspapers, almost all, in the US and Canada. And he puts them on his website, which is Fulton, I believe it's fultonhistory.com. If you go to Fulton History and on Google, you will find it. You can search things. You can search individual newspapers. You can search across platforms. The flip side to that is every now and then he has server trouble. So you go to look for something and it searches and searches and searches and searches and then crashes. But, 85% of the time, it's great. It is amazing. And you can either do a general search, which will give you it'll search through everything, or you can say, okay, well, I know I'm looking in December 1932 of Greenfield Recorder. You can find the file that has those PDFs of the paper, and you just search it page by page. And you do the find and open one, and it will look, and then you close it, and then you open the next page and look, and it's a really fabulous resource. When I first discovered it, I was like, wait, he did what? And we recommend this to everyone, especially the people who want to do research on papers but don't live in the area. That's where it becomes a lot more complicated. And, we will tell people, if you can give us dates and we have the time, we will look it up for you. Unfortunately, and here's where I come into the part where we're not as good, we are not trained genealogists. We are not trained local historians. So as reference librarians, we are good at the basic stuff, but we're not always really good at the what happens if I can't, when I hit my first 3 levels, where do I go from there? And that's where we don't always have the knowledge. We recommend the Greenfield Historical Society. They have people on staff who, I don't want to say have a greater interest, but this has been more of their focus than what we have and what we are able to do. We are generalists. We can help you find basic information. We can help you get started, but if you need a specialist, that's not us. As public librarians, we are generalists. We need to know how to do a little bit of everything. We are willing to give our all, but we also need people to understand that there are times when the answer is, we looked and looked and looked and we didn't find anything, or we're really sorry, we don't know that. And that's when we will refer them to other people. We'll refer them to the Historical Society, and then we will suggest moving on to a library with a larger reference staff that is more focused on reference. So we would suggest talking to the folks in Springfield, talking to the folks in Worcester, emailing the folks in Boston. It depends entirely on what they're looking for. We can also recommend contacting the New England Historical Genealogical Society. We have found them to be very helpful with people as well. Again, the Historical Society, they have interests that encompass a lot of different things in terms of local history. We would also suggest talking to the folks at the National Archives Records Administration. There's a Pittsfield office. I don't know if they are currently open to the public, but I believe they are still taking information questions over email and phones. Or even the Springfield museums. A lot of it is in knowing who to send people to, and it builds. So like our knowledge base might be this big. If we send people to Springfield Public Library, then they've got this much more. If they pass it on to Boston, it's this much more. Eventually it gets there, and it can be a lot of fun doing the path to it. The library does have a subscription to Ancestry. It is until December 31st, remote use as well as in-house, but only if you are a Greenfield Library card holder who lives in Greenfield, because I can't access it from home. It's really annoying. After December 31st, the remote access is going away, but it will still be available in-house. So it's on our public computers. What you can use remote access is corollary to the Ancestry is a subscription to Heritage Quest. Doesn't quite have everything Ancestry does, but it can be a good starting point. And if you just go to our website and check out our links page, it's got a lot of different information. It's got a Greenfield Reporter back about 15 years, searchable, access to the New York Times and the Boston Globe, searchable as well. A lot of different information on there that can be of help to people when they're getting started. So greenfieldpubliclibrary.org, and then click the drop-down links menu that appears on the top. We are building a lovely new building that will be twice the size of the building that we have, but we're not getting more staff. So it's still going to be the same three of us who man the reference department, still working with everything. What it will have is more space. It will be more easily accessible to folks who are not necessarily easily mobile. A lot more wheelchair accessibility, walker accessibility, and more importantly, for the materials that we have, it will be climate controlled so that they will be more protected.
Great.
Yeah, that's really what we're looking forward to. I mean, right now they're just out in the room with us, and our climate control is iffy at best. We are hoping that as time goes on, you know, as we get farther into being in the new building, that we will be able to expand both the staff and the offerings. We just know initially it's going to be us getting used to a new building.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.